So let's talk about how passion actually gives you fuel. Hey there, my friends. Welcome back to the Logistics Life. Now, today, it's really interesting. I'm not sure if how many of you, I know a lot of you do, how many of you actually follow Gary Vee. And, I got an email this morning because VCon had ended last night or the other day. And, it was interesting because the email said passion gives you fuel. And I have most of my shows scheduled months in advance. I have all the ideas in my Notion Life OS dashboard in my second brain that I use all the time, and I just reflect on them, and I might move a few things around, change dates and stuff. But typically, I don't allow very much to come in and change that workflow, right? And it's something that I'm focusing a lot more on these days is that workflow. But one piece of the puzzle that this email brought to me this morning was the fact that passion gives you fuel. And when you think about this, and I changed my workflow only today because I think this message is going to resonate with a lot of you, a lot more than any message, right? So if we go back to when things were booming, if we go back to, call it the market during the pandemic, right? I mean, it was crushing it. Everything we did made money. That dopamine drip, that passion that we had for the industry was astronomical because we were just making money hand over fist. But it's an interesting thing. When times get tough, passion wanes. And what I mean by that is most people, that passion comes from winning. And if you think about it, right? Like when you're in the middle of something and you're in the zone and things are happening and it's good, there's this passion for it. But then when things go bad or not as we want, there becomes this frustration, right? The thing is, I don't think we can have one without the other. So passion gives us fuel. The lack of passion keeps us stagnant. So my message to you today is, how can you, even in this environment, because the thing is, listen, we are seeing signs left, right, and center that things are going to change. When will they change? That's a good question. I read a post from Kevin Hill yesterday talking about the amount of brokerages going out of business. So there's companies leaving the market that's going to level out the truck freight balance and put things back into the equation. There's still companies out there that are just opening in this market. Because in markets like this is where companies, when they take a chance and they make a move, they can really do good things and create massive wealth going forward, serve a ton of people going forward, become the go-to for companies that need them. And I believe this. One of my mentors, Brendan Burchard, said, motion creates Tony Robbins said motion creates emotion, but Brendan Burchard said, like, when you lack motivation, just take a step forward and that motivation will come back. And some of you are probably sitting there going, Dan, it's easy for you to say. No, it's not. Like, I share experiences that are happening in my life, and when I see something that I'm like, wow, that is key, I'll test it, I'll strategize with it, and I'll mull it over to the point where it literally keeps me up at night. But if it's worth it, I'll use it. So passion gives you fuel. Woke up this morning, right when I read that, I blocked out, I moved a meeting, like literally moved a meeting, blocked out 30 minutes on my calendar, and I started writing down, why am I passionate about this industry? What makes this industry, for me, the best industry on the planet? What has it given me? What are some of the wins that I've had? What are some of the losses? But more importantly, not only losses, but what are some of the education piece? What are some of the lessons I learned in it? And I'll tell you, just doing that exercise gave me a massive amount of passion to the point where I changed my show today to re-record this morning to send it to you guys. So this passion is key, right? Have you ever been so passionate about something that you'd go to bed at like 2 a.m. and you'd wake up at 5 and you were just energized? See, passion is the fuel. passion gives you fuel. And he goes on in this email. Maybe you've got the email, and if you have, great. If you haven't, you got to find it. Maybe just go to Gary V's website and register for his emails. But he says something in the end. He says, "Find your passion and your process." So I started thinking about this, and as I'm writing this out this morning, I'm going, okay. So when it comes to process in sales, right? This is one of the reasons why with Bridger, we created 9 different ways to connect in the system. Because I believe everybody has a specific process to them, right? I don't believe there's one way to sell and this is the way you should do it. If you're a DM person, then you get insanely good at DMs. And I've said this before. If you're a cold call person, you get insanely good at cold calls. If you're an email person, you get insanely good at emails. If you get insanely good at the method in which you want to connect, you will be successful. It's sorry, let me rephrase that. And you take consistent action like every day of the week, you will be successful. And I can say that with 100%, like no ifs, ands, or buts, unequivocally, just as I'm sure I know it's going to get dark tonight, this will happen. And you might ask, well, what makes you say that, Dan? Because I've been in sales a long time. I've changed up processes. I've moved things. I've switched from cold calling to doing DMs to back to email and once you find the method that you love, sales becomes fun and it becomes a game. And I don't mean disrespect to any customers out there. I'm not talking about a game with their lives or their freight or their economics, I guess, for lack of a better term, because the reality is in our business, we screw up, it looks bad on our customers, right? It's not just looking bad at us. Our customers have people that they report to, and it looks bad on them. But when I say a game, meaning we can gamify the process and gamify how we're selling, why we're selling, what we're doing, what we're saying, which will then in turn create really cool opportunities for us. It will give us passion. Like imagine, like just think about this for a second, right? The joy of closing an account, right? So we got this joy. What if we were to take that feeling and convert it into how we sell? So every time we send an email, every time we do a cold call, every time we leave a voicemail, that passion gets reignited. How would you start really turning the gears and like ramping up your productivity? I mean, I think it would be astronomical. I think it would be unbelievable. I think it would be amazing. I think it would be beneficial. I think it would be enjoyable. And so it would bring this passion in. And as you gain passion and as you gain motivation, that all escalates. But the same thing happens when we're falling off a cliff. The same thing happens when we're demotivated. The same thing happens when we don't want to wake up in the morning. It's, they call it spiraling, for lack of a better term. I can remember when a while ago, I started really diving into the psychology that we as humans operate in. And I mainly did it because I was in this funk. I didn't know which way was up, which way was down. I was starting to disbelieve in some of the things I was doing. I was starting to lose positivity. I was starting to lose confidence in myself. So I started exploring, okay, what's going on in the brain when these things happen? And how can psychology and how can the process help me either expand or at least, because you guys all know I'm a huge G.I. Joe fan, knowing is half the battle. Knowing what's going on so I can then start putting workflows into place to fix it, right? And, this to me is what I call thinking at a higher level. And there's no ill to anyone that's thinking at a lower level. It's just, this is where my head's at. So when I started really looking at this and then I see this and it says either you love the process or you don't. And that is so true in sales. You either love the process you're doing or you don't. But the beautiful thing about sales, the beautiful thing about what we do, the beautiful thing about our environment, the beautiful thing about our industry is we can constantly change. And what I mean by that is, let's say you are, right now you've got a list of customers, right? And maybe at this point you're going, you know what, Dan, I'm having such a hard time mentally coping with cold calls, mentally coping with prospecting from super cold and trying to bring people to warm. Okay, I understand that, because after, over 2 years, or probably 2 years, just about, maybe a year and 3 quarters of a down market, of people consistently saying, I'm good, no need, stop emailing me, stop calling me, not interested, don't have the freight. I'm trying to keep everybody happy, and I'm going to work with the people that have been there for me during times. I'm really sorry that you've come afterwards, but I can't help you. This starts to chip away. Like I've often said, if you start with like the RPM at its highest, and then by the end of the day, if the RPM goes down to like mid-range or even a quarter of the way up, you're still in the positive. But right now, a lot of people's RPMs are in the negative. They're trying to go forward, but everything happening is going in reverse, right? So I look at that and I say, okay, so you're not loving the process. But my question for you goes far beyond just the process that you're not loving. My question for you then becomes, how is it that we can change the process, alter the process, rework the process to give me energy? So going back to that, maybe you're at a point where cold prospecting is just getting you down. So maybe you either amp, which is like amping up a routine. So maybe instead of just starting out with pure cold calls, because it's that, I got to do this again, which then hesitates you picking up this or your desk phone, if you're still at a desk, to make a call. But what if you just looked at that workflow and said something like, what I'm going to do this morning is I'm going to call every one of my customers. I'm going to have a conversation with them about the value we bring to the table. And maybe it's asking them, what are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? What can we improve on? Maybe you're going to use the reference letter mastery process and stack that I often share, which is, what are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? What can we improve on? If all of them are good, ask for a reference letter. So maybe you do that. And instead of asking for a reference letter, because hopefully you already have one, you say, you know what, Mr. or Mrs. Customer, would you mind maybe giving me a few people that you know? Like, would you mind introducing me to a few people? And maybe your customer doesn't know anybody, but maybe they do. And if you haven't explored that, you can get a warm intro. And now you can start gaining that confidence back, because maybe you feel like you've lost it. Maybe you feel like it's something to do with you. Because I think as a salesperson, a lot of the times when we get rejected constantly, over and over again, I think what happens is we lose confidence in ourselves. But it's nothing against us. It's just, I think it's just the way we're wired, right? From everything I've been reading and everything I've been studying, it typically comes from that wiring process that we have no say in. We just have to try and rewire it. So that would be an idea. And now what's happening is maybe this month, because it is the end of summer, we've got 2.5 weeks left of August before school's back, both in Canada and the US. I know school's back in the US now, but it's like US and Canada, and you're gonna see, maybe you've experienced a lot of out of office replies, right? And in September, all of a sudden they're going to go away, because it's like back to the grind, end of Q3, Q4, everybody's in it. Then it's a new year and everybody, I can't wait to get, what I'm going to do in 2025 and crush everything I've ever said I'm going to crush. But it's that process. So it's just a matter of time before that comes back. But if you change up that process and you say to yourself, okay, I'm still going to block the time out, but instead of doing cold calls, I'm going to do warm calls. So I'm going to call my customers. I'm going to get referrals. And then even if you have 5-6 customers and you get 2 referrals, those 2 conversations can turn that passion around, can reignite that fuel that you need to keep going. And I think a lot of us get caught up in the day-to-day, instead of just breaking that pattern for 2 seconds and saying, okay, if I were to do this, how would I do it? If I were to do this, what would be the benefit of it coming back to me? If I were to do this, what would happen? And then go and do it and just try it. And it's interesting because your customer might say, okay, I got somebody, and they might introduce you. You might not be able to help them, but then you could say, well, is there anyone else that you might know? Right? You can, and this is where I think this warm process really would take effect. The second piece of it is, if you are doing cold outreach and you hate the process that you're doing right now, I would suggest, regardless of where you are at, go out and get a course on doing it a different way. There is a ton of courses out there when it comes to sales. I mean, all you got to do is Google it. There's a ton of books out there when it comes to sales. You can go grab a Jeb Blunt book and he'll give you strategies, ideas, and all that. Maybe it's Go for No. Maybe it's a Bob Berg book. There's so many out there when it comes. Maybe it's Jeffrey Gitomer. Maybe it's a Jordan Belfort. But you get a book and then you look at those sales strategies, right? Maybe you get like Zig Ziglar, and he's always so positive. I love just reading his books because I can just hear his Southern accent. Love it. God rest his soul. But that book will give you new strategies, new ideas. And passion is as simple as getting a new idea and running with it, just to see where it goes. And if it goes somewhere, that gives you more passion. But the beautiful thing is, if it doesn't, you have that book, you have that course where there might be a second strategy. And then you take that strategy and you move with that strategy, which then gives you passion. And it's just, even if it's incremental pieces of motivation until something clicks. And then you're going to find that passion skyrocket. You're going to find that acceleration curve and you're going to go vertical. Right? And this is the key. And as we dive deeper into this, listen, we have good times, we have bad times. There would never be good times if we didn't have bad times. You would never know a bad paycheck if you never got a good paycheck. You would not know happiness if you didn't have sadness. You would not know pleasantry if you didn't have anger. You would not know hate if you didn't have love. We have to have these two pieces of the puzzle in everything. There wouldn't be an up without a down. There wouldn't be a left without a right. There wouldn't be a north without a south. So these things are imperative in our life, and we have to go through them. But the biggest thing is, what is your mindset when you go through it? How are you shifting that mindset to keep that fuel going? Do you see where one sentence in an email can totally change your perspective? One sentence in an email, one headline can bring on massive ideas, strategies that truly change the route that you're going. Positive, negative, don't know. You don't know until you explore it to its final result, right? You will never know if something is really good for you or not so good for you or doesn't work for you until you bring it to its logical conclusion. So, go out there, get a book. Don't care which one. You can, I'm looking at my books here on my bookshelf. I'm looking at Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink. I'm looking at Jordan Belfort, The Way of the Wolf. I'm looking at the Motivation Manifesto. I'm looking at the Little Red Book of Selling by Jeffrey Gitomer. I'm looking at Zig Ziglar on selling. I'm looking at Napoleon Hill's Golden Rules. I'm looking at Launch. I'm looking at Starting with Why. Yeah, that's a great book for sales, Starting with Why. That book has taught me a whole different approach to selling that I love. Because we're starting with why. It goes through a lot of the Apple commercials. And that's actually probably a really good book. I might actually do that for the next book club. But that strategy of going through that, these are all processes where we start going, oh my God, yeah, I'm going to do that. And then we get that passion back. And when we have that passion, people want to talk to us more. And when we have that passion, you'll see all these walls actually start coming down. It's really weird. It's like really odd, weird, but yet really cool to see that when we don't have the perspective of there's going to be walls, there's going to be blocks, I'm going to get this, I'm going to get that, and we just like push through. It's like a train going 100 mile an hour and then trying to put a brick wall in front of it. It is going to annihilate that brick wall in a split second, and it probably won't even lose more than a mile an hour, like forward momentum, right? The faster you're going forward, the more passion, the more oomph that you have behind you, the less any speed bump is going to impact you, and the less any wall somebody puts up is going to stop you. It's when you're hesitant. It's when you're, not confident in what you're doing. For those of you that love golf, right? Confidence in golf is everything. When you lose confidence, you start missing shots. When you lose confidence, you start hitting irate drives, right? When you try and power through it, it never works. But when you're consistent, confident, and smooth, it works. And when we think about that for a second, am I confident? Am I smooth? No. I'm trying to power through. I'm trying to make something happen that isn't at its logical point of completion, right? You just can't do it. It's like trying to wrap a house in the vapor barrier before any of the insulation or anything's in, right? Like you don't wrap a house after you put the siding on. You wrap it before. There's a logical process for everything. Right? So even in that like thought process, and sorry, I apologize. You wrap a house before you put siding on, but the house is wrapped before you put insulation in. Okay, so that process is a step-by-step process, but so is sales. And you have to go through the first couple of steps before you put the siding on, before you put the windows in, before the roof goes on and it starts to look like a house. So you have to put in the steps before it starts to look like a customer, before it starts to look like a hot prospect, before it starts to look like even a warm prospect. You got to put these steps in. But it's creating that process that you love that gives you that energy. So maybe the next step for you is I'm going to get a book and I'm going to do one chapter a week and I'm going to implement those strategies. And each week you get a new desire, a new focus point, a new inflection point that's going to take you vertical and keep that motivation going. That's the message today, my friends. I hope it served you. Remember, go out there, make every call educational, and find a way to crush your sales. We'll see you tomorrow on Data Day.